Caleb Turner had spent most of his life alone on wide open land, so he was used to quiet mornings and long rides. That day seemed no different when he saddled his horse before sunrise and started toward the far side of the valley. He had supplies strapped behind the saddle, flour, medicine, and some tools he had promised to deliver to a small outpost several miles away. The trail was calm, the sky soft with early light, and he expected nothing unusual to happen. But life has a way of surprising a person when he least expects it. As he rode along the narrow path near the river, Caleb noticed something strange in the distance. A horse stood on the far side of the riverbank, shifting uneasily, its reins tangled around a fallen branch. It wasn't the horse itself that made him slow down, but the sight of someone crouched beside it, a young Apache woman, her hands trying to free the reins while keeping the frightened animal calm. Caleb pulled on the reins and let his own horse walk slowly forward. He didn't want to startle her. He knew this was Apache land, and he respected their space. The woman heard his horse's steps and glanced up. She didn't move back or run. Instead, she stood still, watching him with cautious eyes. Caleb raised his hand in a gentle greeting, hoping she understood he meant no harm. She didn't speak, but her posture relaxed just enough for him to approach. "Your horse seems stuck," Caleb said quietly, keeping his voice calm. She nodded once. He noticed that she looked a little tired, maybe from struggling alone with the reins. Her horse kept tugging at the branch, each pull making the situation worse. Caleb stepped down from his saddle and walked slowly toward them. The woman didn't stop him. Her eyes followed his every move, calm but alert, as if she was still deciding whether to trust him. Caleb bent down and began working on the tangled reins. The branch was thick, and the leather straps had wrapped around it several times. He worked patiently so the horse wouldn't panic. The woman stood close, gently touching her horse's neck and whispering something in her language. Her voice had a soft, steady tone that seemed to comfort the animal. After a few minutes, the last strap came loose. The horse jerked back in relief but didn't run. Caleb stepped away to give them space. "There you go," he said with a small smile. For the first time, the Apache woman looked at him, not the cautious look she gave at the beginning, but something different. It was a calm, steady, grateful look. There was something deep in it, something sincere and respectful. It lasted only a second, but it felt like something important had just passed between them. Caleb didn't think much of it. He simply nodded and walked toward his own horse, ready to continue his journey. But that glance would change his life more than he understood. The woman spoke softly, "Thank you." Her English was clear, though touched with the rhythm of her native language. Caleb nodded politely. "Happy to help. Are you far from your camp?" She shook her head. "Just beyond the ridge." "All right then. Take care," Caleb said, mounting his horse again. She gave another small nod before leading her horse away. Caleb turned back to the trail, thinking the moment was finished. Nothing more than a simple act of kindness on a quiet morning. But he was not alone. Hidden among the trees were two Apache scouts who had seen the entire moment unfold. They had watched Caleb approach their tribeswoman, help her without being told, and then ride away without demanding anything or expecting something in return. But more importantly, they had seen her glance, that glance, the kind that held meaning in their traditions. It was not romantic or dramatic. It was a respectful acknowledgement that carried weight in their culture. To them, it meant a connection had been formed, one that could not be ignored. The scouts exchanged a meaningful look. Without speaking, they turned their horses and rode back to their camp as fast as they could. Caleb continued on, unaware that his simple act had already become part of a story he had never agreed to join. He delivered the supplies at the outpost, rested for a short while, and then began his ride back home. The sun was higher now, casting warm light over the valley. Caleb liked days like this, quiet, predictable, peaceful. He had lived too many years with trouble around him, and he treasured any moment that felt calm. As he reached the open stretch of land near his ranch, he felt a brief sense of pride. He'd fixed broken fences, planted new lines of trees, and restored the old barn mostly with his own hands. It wasn't a grand place, but it was honest, and it was his. He put away his horse, checked the water trough, and walked inside to wash his hands. Everything felt normal again. The moment with the Apache woman already felt distant, just another passing event on the trail. But far away, in the Apache camp, her story was being told to the elders. The two scouts stood before the circle of elders, explaining everything they had seen. They described Caleb's behavior, how he approached respectfully, how he helped without being asked, how he spoke calmly, and how their tribeswoman had looked at him afterward. The elders listened carefully, considering every detail. At first, Caleb's name meant nothing to them. But the more the scouts explained, the more serious the elders became. Their tribe held a tradition older than anyone in the camp. According to their law, when a woman gave a certain look to a man, a look of sincere respect after an act of help, it formed a bond of responsibility. It was not marriage or claim. It was a promise, a rule, a cultural law that said the man must stand for her if danger ever came to her life. The elders turned to Ayanna, the young woman Caleb had helped. They asked her questions. They asked if she had looked at him in that way. They asked if she felt gratitude. They asked if she believed he had acted with sincerity. Ayanna thought for a long moment. Then she spoke honestly. He helped me with no fear in his eyes and no demand in his voice. He was kind. I respected that. The elders exchanged silent looks. Her answer confirmed their beliefs. According to their tradition, this cowboy Caleb Turner was now connected to Ayanna by an old law. A responsibility had been placed on him. A responsibility he did not know existed. That evening, as the sun dipped and shadows stretched long across the land, a small group of Apache riders mounted their horses. They were not angry. They were not going to threaten him. They were going to speak with him in peace, but with seriousness. Because a law was a law, and their elders had made a decision. Back on the ranch, Caleb was finishing his dinner when he heard horses outside. He stepped out, wiping his hands on his shirt, and saw 3 Apache riders waiting near his fence. They sat calmly, straight-backed, their eyes steady but not unfriendly. Caleb approached slowly, unsure what this visit meant. One of the riders spoke first. "Caleb Turner?" "Yes," he answered. "You helped one from our tribe today." Caleb nodded. "Just a simple thing." "It was not simple," the rider replied. "And now, you must honor our law." Caleb's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but in confusion. "Your law?" "Yes," the rider said. "You must come with us. The elders will explain." Caleb looked at them, at their calm faces and patient posture. Nothing about them felt threatening, but their words carried weight. Something serious had begun, and he had no idea what it was. He took a breath, grabbed his hat, and stepped forward. "All right," he said. "I'll come." He didn't know then how deeply that single glance had already shaped his future. He only knew that something unexpected was waiting for him at the Apache camp, and once he crossed into their world, nothing would ever be the same again. Caleb rode with the Apache riders in silence as the evening settled across the land. The air turned cooler, carrying the soft smell of pine and dust. The horses moved at a steady pace, and Caleb tried to read the riders beside him. They were calm and respectful, not hostile, but they also weren't relaxed. They rode with purpose, like men carrying out an important duty. Caleb had been around people long enough to know when something serious was happening, even if no one said a word. They reached the ridge and descended into a valley glowing with the warm colors of sunset. The Apache camp rested near the trees. Smoke curled gently from cooking fires, and people moved quietly around their shelters. Children played near the center, though even they lowered their voices when they noticed the riders. Everyone seemed aware of something important unfolding. Caleb felt a strange mix of nerves and curiosity. He had never been invited into an Apache camp before. He had respected them from a distance, kept peace with them, shared trails. But this was different. This time, they had brought him here, with intention. One of the riders gestured for him to dismount. Caleb followed, tying his horse to a post. People watched him as he stepped onto the ground. But no one approached him. No one seemed angry. They just waited. He could feel their eyes studying him, not with blame, but with some kind of expectation. A tall elder walked toward him. His hair was long and silver, his face marked with the lines of many winters, but his posture was straight and strong. His eyes were calm, steady, and wise. Caleb had met many leaders in his life, and he recognized one as soon as he saw him. "You are Caleb Turner," the elder said. "Yes, sir," Caleb replied respectfully. "You helped Ayanna," the elder continued. "I did," Caleb said. "Her horse was stuck. Anyone would have done the same." The elder nodded slowly, as if he understood Caleb's words but still saw something larger behind them. "Come," he said. "We must speak." He led Caleb toward the center of the camp, where a circle of elders waited around a fire. The riders who brought him stepped back, giving space. Caleb stood quietly as the elders watched him, their expressions unreadable but not unfriendly. The silver-haired elder gestured for him to sit on a blanket near the fire. Caleb obeyed, keeping his posture respectful. The flames flickered gently, lighting the faces around him. "You do not know why you are here," the elder said. "No," Caleb admitted honestly. "I only know I helped a young woman with her horse. If something else happened, I didn't mean any disrespect." "No. There was no disrespect," the elder said. "Your actions were good. They were sincere." Caleb felt the firelight warm his face. He listened carefully, unsure what direction this conversation would take. "In our tribe," the elder continued, "when a woman looks at a man with a certain kind of trust and respect after he helps her, it creates a bond. It is our old law. It is not marriage, and it is not ownership." Caleb's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Responsibility?" The elder nodded. "Yes. A man who receives that look must protect her if danger comes to her life. It has been this way since long before any of us were born." Caleb didn't interrupt. He just took a slow breath and tried to fully understand the situation. Another elder spoke, his voice softer. "We saw the moment. Ayanna herself agreed. She looked at you with that respect. This is not something we force. It is a tradition based on honor. You helped her. She acknowledged it. The bond was made." Caleb rubbed his thumb against the edge of his jeans, thinking deeply. He wasn't angry, only surprised. He didn't see anything wrong with helping someone, especially someone in trouble, but he had never imagined such a simple act could carry such meaning for a tribe. "I'm just a rancher," he said quietly. "I didn't intend to step into something sacred." "We know," the silver-haired elder replied. "Intent does not change what is already done. But we do not demand anything from you that is harmful or unfair." Caleb looked around the circle. Their faces were serious but calm. There was no threat, no pressure, just a clear explanation of a belief they had held for generations. "What danger is she in?" Caleb asked, voice steady. The elders exchanged glances. A younger elder leaned forward slightly. "For weeks, a small rival group has moved near our border. They have caused trouble in the past. Nothing serious yet, but we fear they may come again. Ayanna's family is close to the ridge they watch. If trouble comes, the old law says the man connected to her must help." Caleb stared into the fire for a moment. He didn't want to act foolishly or make a promise he couldn't keep. But he also couldn't imagine riding away from a situation where someone he had helped even briefly could face danger alone. "What exactly are you asking of me?" he finally asked. "We ask you to stay until we know if danger is real," the elder said. "We ask you to stand nearby, not as a warrior, not as one of us, but as someone who honors his word through action." Caleb thought again. It wasn't an impossible request. It wasn't unfair. And, more importantly, it wasn't something he felt comfortable refusing. His conscience wouldn't let him walk away. "All right," he said slowly. "I'll stay. I'll help if danger comes. I don't know much about your laws, but I know what it means to stand by someone." The elders nodded, satisfied. Ayanna approached quietly from behind the circle, her soft steps barely making a sound. She stood near the firelight, her expression calm and thoughtful. Caleb looked at her and saw no fear in her eyes, only honesty. "I did not know the scouts saw us," she said to him. "I did not mean to bring trouble to you." "It's not trouble," Caleb replied gently. "I helped because it was the right thing. If there's more to do, then I'll stand with you." Ayanna gave a small, grateful nod. It wasn't the same glance she had given him at the river. This one was simpler, warmer, free of old rules. It was just a thank you. The elders told Caleb he would stay near the camp overnight. They gave him a blanket, a space near a quiet shelter, and food. Caleb was surprised by the kindness. He had expected caution, not hospitality. The camp moved calmly around him as the stars came out. People cooked their evening meals, tended to their horses, and talked quietly around small fires. Ayanna stayed near her family's shelter, but she glanced his way now and then, making sure he was comfortable. Caleb didn't feel out of place, just unfamiliar with their ways. Yet something about the land, the firelight, and the peaceful night made him feel strangely welcome. Later, as he lay on the blanket and looked up at the sky, he thought about how his life had changed in a single day. He had woken up, expecting an ordinary trip. Instead, he was now part of an Apache tradition older than any building in his town. He didn't know what the next day would bring, but he wasn't afraid. He felt calm, as if he was doing something that mattered. Near midnight, he saw two elders speaking quietly near a fire. Their voices carried through the still air, just enough for him to hear a few words. "The cowboy has a good heart," one said. He accepted without anger. "He may be the right one," the other replied. "Sometimes the old laws choose well." Caleb didn't know if they meant him or something larger, but he felt a small weight lift from his shoulders. He closed his eyes and let the sounds of the camp settle around him. The next morning would come with new challenges, new responsibilities, and maybe even danger. But for now, he rested peacefully, unaware that his presence in the camp was already bringing a quiet sense of confidence to the tribe. And though he didn't know it yet, his decision to honor their law would lead to choices that would shape not only his path but Ayanna's as well. Caleb woke before the first light touched the sky. He wasn't sure if the soft sounds of the camp had woken him, or if his mind simply refused to rest longer in an unfamiliar place. The Apache camp was quiet, peaceful, and almost beautiful in the early morning hush. Smoke drifted from the last embers of the night fires, and the cool air carried the scent of earth and pine. For a moment, Caleb simply sat up on his blanket and looked around, trying to understand how much had changed in less than a day. He had come here as an outsider. Now he had been given a responsibility without ever asking for it. Yet somehow, he didn't resent it. He felt strangely steady, as if something inside him understood the seriousness of the moment even better than his thoughts did. As the sun slowly rose, a few people began moving through the camp. Women carried water in clay pots, children rubbed sleep from their eyes, and men checked their horses quietly. Caleb stood and folded the blanket they had given him. He didn't want to appear lazy or disrespectful. He believed that when you were in someone else's home, especially a whole tribe's, you showed them the best of your manners. Ayanna appeared near the edge of her family's shelter, brushing her horse with long, slow strokes. When she noticed Caleb walking toward her, she paused and gave him a polite nod. He returned the gesture, unsure if he should say something first or wait for her to speak. "You slept well?" she asked softly. "Well enough," Caleb replied. "The camp is peaceful." She smiled a little, a quiet smile that didn't try to draw attention. "Some nights. Not all." Caleb glanced toward the ridge that stretched across the far end of the valley. "Because of the trouble your elders mentioned?" Ayanna nodded, her expression growing thoughtful. "The other group has moved closer each week. They do not always mean harm, but they test our patience. They test the border. Some fear they want to move us away from our water sources." Caleb understood that kind of tension. Land disputes were common across the West. People argued over water, grazing fields, hunting routes, anything that meant survival. But he also knew fear could make people act rashly. "I'm not a soldier," Caleb said gently, "but I'll do whatever I can to help." "I know," Ayanna replied. "You didn't come here for trouble. You came because you help people without asking anything in return." Caleb didn't know what to say to that. He wasn't used to being praised. He simply nodded and walked with her toward the center of the camp. The elders gathered again after breakfast, forming the same calm circle around the fire. Today, their faces looked more serious, as if the weight of the situation had deepened overnight. Caleb sat quietly among them, waiting. The silver-haired elder began speaking. "Last night, our scouts saw movement near the ridge. 3 riders from the rival group. They did not approach, but they watched our camp." Caleb leaned forward slightly. "Were they looking for someone in particular?" "We do not know," another elder said. "But in the past, when people have watched without speaking, it meant they were planning to test our strength." Caleb understood the meaning clearly. "You think they may come soon?" "Yes," the elder replied. "We do not want conflict. We want to keep peace. But we cannot pretend the danger is not real." Ayanna stepped into the circle then, her voice steady. "If they come again, I will be the one on the ridge. That is where my family's shelter stands." Caleb felt something inside him tighten. She was calm, almost accepting, but he could hear the unspoken worry in her voice. She knew her family was at risk. The elders turned to Caleb. "This is why the old law matters," one said. "Not to burden you, but to give her someone who will stand beside her if danger arrives." Caleb took a slow breath. He looked at Ayanna, then back at the elders. "I gave you my word yesterday. I'll keep it. Just tell me what you need me to do." The elders nodded, relieved. "You will stay near her family's shelter tonight," the silver-haired elder said. "You will watch the ridge with her brother and 2 scouts. If anything happens, you will stand with them." Caleb agreed without hesitation. It felt right. He didn't know how the situation would unfold, but he knew he wouldn't walk away. Throughout the day, Caleb helped repair a small fence near the camp. He carried water, gathered wood, and listened to the sounds of the camp as people worked together with natural unity. They didn't treat him like an outsider. They didn't fear him. They simply accepted his presence, quietly but openly. Ayanna passed him several times, each time giving a small nod of acknowledgement. Caleb didn't talk much, but he felt a sense of partnership forming. Not forced, not tied by the old law, something simpler. Respect, understanding. As the sun faded from the sky, scouts rode to the ridge to take their positions. Caleb joined them, carrying a lantern and a long rope he might need if anything went wrong with the horses. Ayanna's brother, a calm young man named Tohani, nodded at him. "You are ready," Tohani said. "I hope I am," Caleb replied honestly. The ridge was quiet under the deepening twilight. Caleb could see far across the land, the shadows growing long, the trees moving gently with the wind, the faint glow of the campfires behind them. He felt alert but strangely peaceful. He wasn't there to fight. He was there to watch, to stand firm, to to honor the responsibility given to him. Ayana joined them after a while, carrying a small blanket and a pouch of dried fruit. She handed some to her brother, then offered some to Caleb. He accepted, with a grateful nod. "You don't have to stay up all night," Caleb told her. "I do," she said simply. "It is my duty to watch the ridge. And you are here because of the law that includes me." Caleb didn't argue. He respected her resolve. Hours passed quietly. The moon rose high, painting the land in pale silver. Caleb listened to the wind, the soft movements of the horses, and the distant sounds of the camp. Every now and then, he and Ayana exchanged quiet glances, wordless but steady. Near midnight, a faint sound broke the peaceful rhythm. Hooves. Slow, creeping hooves. Tohani stiffened. One of the scouts raised his hand to signal silence. Caleb leaned forward, eyes narrowing. In the distance, near the dark line of trees, he saw them. 3 riders. The same ones mentioned that morning. They weren't charging. They weren't yelling. They simply watched. Ayana whispered, "They test again." Caleb felt his heartbeat pick up. He was not a warrior, but he stood with purpose. Tohani stepped forward and lit a torch, lifting it high. The flame burned bright against the darkness, sending a clear signal. "We see you. We are ready. We are not alone." The riders paused, their silhouettes motionless against the trees. Then, after a long moment, they turned their horses and disappeared into the night. No fight, no threat. But the message was clear. They were being watched. Ayana let out a slow breath. "They wanted to see if we were weak." "We're not," Caleb replied quietly. She turned to him, her voice soft but certain. "You being here made the ridge stronger." Caleb didn't know how to respond. He simply nodded, feeling the truth of her words, even if he hadn't meant to play a large role. The old law had placed him here, but now he realized he would have stood here even without it. The scouts stayed alert until dawn. When the first light broke across the sky, turning the ridge gold, the danger had passed for the night. The riders had not returned. As they walked back toward the camp, Ayana stopped for a moment and looked at Caleb. The morning light made her expression soft and honest. "You honored the law," she said. "But more than that, you honored us." Caleb felt a quiet sense of pride, not for himself, but for doing what needed to be done. He didn't know what the rival group would do next. He didn't know what the elders would ask of him now. But he knew one thing with certainty. He would continue standing with the Apache as long as they needed him. Because the bond formed on that riverbank had grown into something deeper than tradition. It had become a choice, and one he would not turn away from. The morning sun rose slowly over the valley, casting a warm glow across the Apache camp. After the tense night on the ridge, the soft light felt like a blessing. People moved through the camp with careful steps, still alert but calmer than before. Caleb walked alongside Ayana and Tohani, their horses trailing behind them. The camp looked peaceful, but everyone knew the peace was fragile. The rival group had watched from a distance, and that meant they could return at any time. When the elders gathered once more, they studied Caleb with thoughtful eyes. He felt their gaze but didn't feel judged. Instead, it felt like they were measuring something quiet inside him. Commitment, sincerity, maybe strength of character. The silver-haired elder spoke first. "You stood on the ridge. You saw what we face." Caleb nodded. "Yes. They wanted to see if you were weak, but you're not. And neither are you," another elder added gently. "Your presence changed the night." Caleb didn't know how to answer that. He wasn't a warrior. He hadn't carried a weapon. He had simply stood there because he said he would. But in this camp, that seemed to matter deeply. Ayana stepped forward then, her posture straight but calm. "They will come again," she said. "This time, They may not stay in the shadows. The elders agreed. The rival group had tested them twice now. The next test might be real and direct. Everyone knew it. Caleb could feel it in the air. The quiet tension, the watchful glances, the soft murmurs around the fires. Tohani, standing close to his sister, turned to Caleb. "You do not have to stay another night," he said, voice steady. "You have honored the law already." Caleb looked at him, surprised by the offer. He expected them to ask him to stay longer, not release him. He glanced at Ayanna, who stood quietly beside her brother. She didn't speak, but her eyes held a question: would he leave now that he had fulfilled the bare minimum of the old law? Caleb took a slow breath. "I gave you my word," he said, "and you gave me your trust. I'm not going anywhere." Ayanna's eyes softened. Tohani nodded with respect. The elders exchanged glances of approval. "Then tonight," the silver-haired elder said, "we prepare." The rest of the day passed with a steady, organized purpose. People worked together, strengthening fences, checking horses, and gathering supplies. Caleb helped wherever he could, carrying wood, tying ropes, fixing worn-out poles, anything that needed hands and effort. No one treated him like an outsider anymore. Children waved to him, adults greeted him with nods of trust, and elders watched him with calm satisfaction. He had become part of their circle, at least for the moment. Ayanna spent much of the day near the ridge with a small group, marking the spots where scouts should stand after sundown. Caleb joined her there in the late afternoon, helping place stones and markers so the watchers could find their positions even in the dark. "You seem calm," Ayanna said quietly as they worked. Caleb shrugged lightly. "Worry doesn't help anyone. Staying alert does." She glanced at him, thoughtful. "You have a steady spirit. Some people panic when danger comes. You don't." "I've lived through enough storms," Caleb said. "A man learns to keep his feet on the ground." Ayanna gave a small smile. "I am glad the old law chose someone like you." "Ow." Caleb didn't know how to respond to that. So he simply nodded and continued placing markers along the ridge. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with deep oranges and pinks, the camp grew quiet again. Fires were lit, and the scouts prepared for another long night. Caleb took his place with Tohani, Ayanna, and 3 more scouts. They stood on the ridge, facing the vast stretches of land beyond the trees. The air turned cool as night spread across the valley. The moon rose slowly, casting a soft silver light across the ground. For a long time, everything remained still. The wind whispered through the grass, the horses shifted softly, and the campfires behind them glowed like warm stars. Then, far in the distance, a sound echoed hooves. Slow and steady. The scouts stiffened. Ayanna narrowed her eyes. Caleb leaned forward, trying to see through the darkness. And there they were, again the 3 riders from before. But this time, they didn't stay far away. They moved slowly, deliberately, toward the ridge. Caleb's heartbeat quickened, but he didn't move back. He stood firm beside the Apache watchers. Tohani lifted a torch and held it high again, but the riders didn't stop this time. They continued forward until they were close enough to see clearly 3 men on horseback, their expressions hard, their posture bold. They weren't here to talk. They weren't here to threaten quietly from the shadows. They had come to test the tribe directly. One of the riders raised his voice. "You are close to our hunting ground. Move back, or we push you out." Tohani stepped forward. "This is our land. Our elders have spoken. We have lived here long before your group came." The man on the horse scowled. "We claim this ridge now." Ayanna stepped beside her brother. "You claim what is not yours. We will not move." The man scoffed. "Then we will take it." It was clear to everyone that he wanted to show dominance, not negotiate. It could have turned into a dangerous situation. But instead of drawing a weapon or threatening back, Caleb walked forward, calmly. He stood between the Apache scouts and the riders, not in defiance, but with steady confidence. "You've been watching their camp for days," Caleb said, his voice strong but controlled. "You've approached at night, stayed in the shadows. If you want to fight, why didn't you start it then? Why wait?" The rider narrowed his eyes. "Who are you?" "Someone who doesn't want trouble," Caleb replied. "But I'll stand with them if you bring it here." The rider scoffed again. "One cowboy against 3 of us?" Caleb didn't flinch. 3 against a whole tribe. Doesn't sound wise either, does it? The other 2 riders exchanged glances. They had expected fear or retreat, not calm reasoning. They expected the tribe to feel outnumbered, pressured. Instead, they saw unity, Apache scouts on one side, a steady-eyed cowboy on the other. Caleb continued. "They're not weak. They're not alone. And I promise you this, if you try to push them from land that's theirs, the land itself will push back harder than any man." The leader's jaw tightened. He wasn't sure how to respond. He had come expecting resistance. Yes, but not this quiet strength. Not this unexpected addition, the cowboy who stood firmly with the Apache as if he had always belonged there. Finally, with a frustrated snort, the leader pulled on his reins. "This is not over," he muttered. "But not tonight." 2. The 3 riders turned and disappeared into the darkness once more. This time, their retreat carried hesitation, not confidence. Ayanna let out the breath she had been holding. Tohani lowered the torch. The scouts looked at one another, amazed at how the confrontation had ended without danger. "You stood firm," Ayanna said softly to Caleb. "I just said what needed saying," Caleb replied, though even he felt the weight of what had happened. When they returned to the camp, the elders listened carefully as the scouts explained everything. They were quiet for a long moment, absorbing the details. "You changed the night," the silver-haired elder finally said to Caleb. "Not with force, with calm strength." Caleb shook his head modestly. "I only spoke the truth." "That is what makes your words powerful," the elder replied. Ayanna stood beside her family, watching Caleb with quiet admiration. She knew now that the old law had not brought them misfortune. It had brought them someone willing to stand with them, not because he was forced, but because he chose to. The elders declared the camp safe for the night. People gathered around fires, sharing warm food and gentle laughter. Children played again. The fear that had settled in the camp for weeks finally began to melt away. Caleb stayed near the fire with Ayanna and Tohani, feeling the warmth of the flames and the warmth of the tribe's gratitude around him. He hadn't asked for any of this. Yet he felt more connected to these people than he had expected. Ayanna turned to him quietly. "You honored the law. And more. You honored us." Caleb looked into the flames, thoughtful. "Sometimes life brings you to a place you never expected. And sometimes the right thing is to stay." She smiled, soft and grateful. It wasn't the sacred glance from the river. It was something simpler. Friendship, trust, respect that grew naturally, not through tradition. Later that night, as Caleb prepared to rest near the camp once more, the elder approached him again. "You are part of our circle now. You have earned that place." Caleb nodded with emotion he didn't show often. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That means more than you know." As he lay down under the stars, listening to the peaceful sounds of the camp, Caleb felt something shift inside him. He had come here because of a single glance, a moment he hadn't understood. But now he realized something deeper. He stayed not because of the law. He stayed because of the people. And in their eyes, he had become more than a visitor. He had become a man they trusted, a man they stood beside, a man who would always be welcome among them.